Welcome to Kids Matter. I'm Dr. Elisa Minkin. As a pediatrician, mom, and grandma, I understand how challenging it can be to help our kids grow into their best selves. We are so much more powerful together. Here, I will be sharing the knowledge and wisdom of a wide range of people who understand and care deeply about children. I'm hoping for your input as well, because kids really do matter. They are our future. Welcome back to the Kids Matter podcast. I'm really excited and really honored to have with me today Melanie Potock, who is both a feeding therapist and a speech therapist. She is a pediatric feeding therapist, international speaker, and certified speech and language pathologist with over 2 decades of experience helping children and families establish healthy relationships with food. Known as Coach Mel on Instagram under My Munchbug. I love that. She is the author of 6 books, including the award-winning Raising a Healthy, Happy Eater. For people who have this on video, there you go. I'm going to link them in the show notes. And Responsive Feeding. A sought-after expert in both typical and complex feeding development, Melanie combines evidence-based strategies with real-life parenting insight. Her guidance has been featured in over 50 media outlets, including CNN and the New York Times, certified by ASHA, this is the American Speech and Hearing Association.
Correct.
And the recipient of ASHA's 2024 State Clinical Achievement Award. Wow. Melanie has also received 8 ACE Awards for excellence in continuing education and provides training for healthcare professionals worldwide. So, as a pediatrician and a mom of a child who had really very severe feeding problems, I happen to be very passionate about raising kids to be healthy, adventurous eaters. And I'm so excited to have you here. You've been so approachable and so amazing just to work this out with me. So thank you so much for joining me today. And we're going to go right into it. I want to divide our talks. We talked about not biting off more than we can chew. I want to divide our talks into 2 parts and have you come back for part 2. So today will be about typical feeding issues, the typical developmental milestones to expect, and then we'll get to actual problems with feeding at part 2. So I'm going to ask you to start, please, with baby's introduction to solids. We're going to skip over the bottle and breast, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely. Well, also, thank you. I'm so excited to be on this podcast with you. And I know it's taken a little time to schedule it, and you've been so patient and wonderful. So I could talk about this topic all day long, so I'm going to jump right into it. You were asking when a baby should start solids. And I think this is a great question because it's amazing how many parents get their information off social media. It's part of the reason why I'm on Instagram. But, there are so many different opinions about this. And let me try to break it down in the easiest way possible. Typically, we anticipate that the majority of babies will start solids at about 6 months, right when they turn 6 months. But it does depend on signs of readiness, like sitting with a little bit of support, maybe, some really good head and neck control. That's probably more important even than the sitting, because we can certainly help to bolster up their little hips with a rolled up towel or something like that. And I have a lot of information about that on my Instagram. We want to make sure that that child is already bringing hands and toys to mouth, unless they have some special needs around motor challenges and they're seeing an occupational therapist or a physical therapist or a speech language pathologist, then we'll help the parents adapt so that we can start solids at that 6-month mark. And then finally, we do like to see kids show an interest at, what you're eating. It's not an absolute necessity, but it's one of the things we love to see in terms of readiness signs. The main thing that we pay attention to is that head and neck control, because that's what we need for safe swallowing. We can usually adapt around the other things. And then I'm going to probably read your mind here, but you want to move on to.
How do you know?
In terms of what to feed them, there's a lot of different ways to approach this. And I don't want to jump ahead too much, but because we were talking about safe swallowing, you want to make sure that whatever you're going to provide, that it's squishable, almost like you were to press down on, oh gosh, a little piece of avocado between your thumb and your forefinger. And if you can press down and you can easily squish it as you pinch it between your two fingers, probably baby can too, because you don't need teeth at 6 months to eat. You just need gums and a relatively strong jaw, which they should have by now because of 6 months of breast or bottle feeding. And you just mostly want to start with small tastes, not full meals, just little tastes of a variety of things, and just follow your baby's cues and really follow what we call a responsive feeding model. I have a book called Responsive Feeding, and that's just simply where we're really paying attention to the baby's cues, making sure that we're following their lead and really letting them explore.
Love that. I love that. A couple things. I'm glad you brought out that babies can chew without teeth because that's one problem, one question that parents often have is how can they have solids when they don't have teeth?
Correct. You know, it really is just those gums and the tongue squishing that food. You can certainly offer purees as well. I'm a big fan of offering both purees and more squishable foods like roasted vegetables, like a little piece of roasted squash, or even a strip of roasted bell pepper, that avocado I mentioned, that squishable food. Those are all foods that baby can learn to self-feed using a baby-led weaning method, but you don't have to limit yourself to only baby self-feeding. You can certainly learn how to present the spoon and offer a variety of different thicknesses of puree because that helps to build skill too.
Love that. And you're mentioning baby-led weaning, and that is a question as a pediatrician I get asked all the time. Should I do baby-led weaning or should I do purees? And so I want you to talk a little bit more about that. Why would someone just choose baby-led weaning? Why are purees also important in your mind? Because
I
this is sort of ideological to some degree. I wish it
Well,
weren't.
you know, my job as a pediatric feeding therapist is to support either model that the family wants to follow. They're both great, but there's nothing wrong with combining it. And in my experience, more parents want more of a hybrid approach. And I think it's because with baby led weaning, as great as it it isn't what they grew up with, and they want to do what's familiar while slowly introducing some of these baby led weaning concepts. So that hybrid approach to me is the best of both worlds. And in terms of the benefits of puree, the wonderful Catherine Shaker, who's an expert in our field, is the one who said to me once, she said, you know, Mel, we know for sure that purees help to build the intrinsic tongue muscles, and those are essential for safe swallowing. They have a purpose. And of course, adults eat purees all the time. We all eat yogurt and applesauce and a variety of yummy sauces that are, you know, poured over our mashed potatoes, that sort of thing. I could probably name 100 different purees we enjoy. We just don't always think of them as a quote puree. So it's definitely a category of texture that we want the child to be introduced to early. We just don't want to linger there. We just don't want kids to be 100% on purees by the 9th month, because that indicates that they aren't getting the practice and the repetition to begin working their jaw muscles, their tongue muscles, their throat muscles to safely learn to swallow, that are so intimately tied to reflexes at that age as well. So hybrid approach is what I really encourage.
Love that. And I'm glad that you're explaining that different things are happening when you feed purees versus the baby-led weaning, where the baby is doing it on their own, often with more solid type textures. And I think there's a lot of things to pick apart there. Okay, because I think from a parent's perspective, they may like the purees better because they see and can measure what goes in.
Yeah.
I want you to talk a little bit about that. I could talk about it forever.
That's so true. And you know, over 30 years ago, when I started my career as a feeding specialist in the NICU with these babies who are just learning to probably bottle feed, work our way up to breastfeeding, even in that situation, so many professionals of my generation, I'm in my 60s, that they all had this mindset that the baby needs to finish the bottle. And even as baby got a little bit older, I would see parents come in and they thought they had to finish the bottle because that's the way we were raised. But we know so much more now. We know that if we're going to follow a responsive feeding model, which is the only method of feeding that the American Academy of Pediatrics, UNICEF, the World Health Organization, that they all endorse, because it's an umbrella over baby-led weaning and traditional purees. Responsive feeding is the model we want to strive for. That when we really take the time to read the baby's cues, to stop when the baby indicates they want to stop, to pause when the baby indicates they want to pause, and then they're ready to begin again, and to offer whenever they appear like they're ready and hungry, we are providing that reciprocity, that beautiful dance, that communication between the two of us. And we know for sure that when we allow kids to do that, they're more likely to grow at a healthy growth rate, including their actual body weight, and not exceed that, not be overfed. And they also pay attention to their own hunger cues rather than performing and sucking on a bottle or being asked to stay at the breast too long because we're driving them to do that. And that's strictly because a lot of us were raised that way, and we just know more now. So that's why I really stress to the parents above all else, this is about communication almost more than it is the food.
I love that. And I didn't know until I read your book, Responsive Feeding, that pureed feeding could be done within that responsive methodology. And I think that's really important because I think there's a backlash within the baby-led weaning movement that we're not going to force feed, so we're going to let the baby choose. But as any parent feeding a baby for the first time knows, it all seems to end up on the floor. And then what are they actually eating? And so I've heard the line, food before one is just for fun. What is your take on that?
I really understand the intention behind that phrase, but the truth is, food before one is for learning. And so many of our kids begin to, and you can speak to this as a pediatrician, begin to deplete their iron stores and other important nutrients at about 6 months of age, that we really do want to encourage some consumption. And certainly as long as we're offering iron-rich food and food that offer a variety of nutrition, eventually the kids get it in. But I think one thing we want to be sure not to forget is the latest research on introducing top 9 allergens. So if I can just quickly recap that and why this is so important and why I love purees, is because we know, based on the research around egg and peanuts, that babies who are introduced safe versions, in other words, diluted, smooth peanut butter, maybe diluted with a little bit of breast milk, just a couple teaspoons or so, that when they get that a few times a week, as early as 4 months, they are much less likely to develop an allergy to peanuts. We have similar data around eggs, and we apply that data to the other 7 allergens as well. So to recap everything that we've been saying and the excellent points you're bringing up, another reason to consider possibly introducing a few tastes of foods as early as 4 months with your doctor's approval would be to introduce those allergens early. But for sure, we got to do it at 6 months. And when I say a few tastes, it might just be a little bit of that puree on your pinky finger and they just suck it off while you're holding them a little bit upright. It's not sitting in a high chair having breakfast. You want to think of it almost like a little bit of medicine in a way, that those top 9 allergens are going to help to prevent future allergies. And
Really
purees are
important
going to be the easiest way to provide that too.
Yes, first I just have to give my disclaimer. We're not here for medical advice. Please consult with your pediatrician
Yes.
or clinician about when to start solids and when you should do it at 4 months and when you should do the allergens. We're not here for that. But that's really, really important. And that's one big change that's happened over time. But a baby could do that on their own. That's not really, in my mind, related to baby-led weaning versus
Well,
purees, right?
and to clarify a little bit, they absolutely could do it on their own. But to piggyback on your earlier comment about not knowing how much they consume, I prefer that the parents provide those top 9 allergens via puree at first, because we want to make sure, according to the research, they get roughly about 2 teaspoons twice a week.
Ah,
So
I see.
now, if you're
Yeah.
gently spoon feeding your child, looking for their cues that they're ready to accept the spoon, that, yep, I'd love a little taste of that, then it's so easy to get in those allergens early on. However, we still want to follow a responsive feeding model. And if baby isn't into taking a taste of that at that moment, you've got several more days in the week where you can give it another try. It'll be okay.
Great. I never heard that before, and that's a valuable nugget. So thank you. I wanted to ask you how parents should introduce solids related to the formula of breast milk, because you mentioned not having enough
Yeah.
iron. Well, babies who are in formula, that formula is fortified with iron. It has all the nutrients. It is potentially a full set of nutrients and calories for a baby if they were just to be on a formula till a year. That's not nutritionally a reason, right? Breastfeeding is different.
Breastfeeding is different. Breastfeeding is different. And some babies really take off with solid food and they begin to take less and less formula sooner than the other baby. And that's why, in my mind, we also find those well checks to be so important, so that we can really keep tabs on how much formula they're actually consuming. I still think it's important to introduce those iron rich foods and keep a variety of nutrition available for them. But yeah, I do feel that formula provides a little bit more of a safeguard. And in terms of the timing that you asked about, typically we offer just about 10 minutes of playing in solids, mouthing a few pieces of soft, squishable foods, just starting to drive that interest. About one time a day, maybe two if you have time. And we typically do that after, sometimes we will do it after a happy milk feed where they're not tired. They're like, my belly's full. I'm not like, I've got to get something in me. We don't want to be too hungry. But other times you might have the option to do it right before a milk feed, where they're not so hungry that they're willing to explore and put foods up to their mouth, but they don't become so hangry or so frustrated that they assign those frustrated feelings to the solid foods, because really they just want the breast or bottle. So here we get back to responsive feeding, where each child is unique and we're just paying attention to their cues to figure out what works for them.
I love that. And it's going to change over time, and it
Yes.
should change over time. Like, right, that pattern of the once a day, almost more of a play, is going to have to move to actually consuming more food and less milk.
Very good. Yep, 100%.
So, I know as a pediatrician, what I do is at the 9-month visit, I go through just a brief anticipatory guidance that I want the child at 1 to have 3 meals, 2 snacks, and not more than 24 ounces of milk if they're having milk in a bottle. And I tell them that because what I see, one pitfall that I see, and we could talk about other pitfalls to transitioning to solids, is if you don't tell them that, they may not realize, and the kid may still be licking food and having 32 or more ounces a day of milk, and then they're not hungry. And I really want you to talk a little bit about the window of learning to eat, because that's one
Yes.
problem I see.
Yes, yes. Well, first of all, there's a flavor window between 4 and 6 months, where kids, really 4 and 7 months, where kids are really interested in flavors. How many times have we all watched on YouTube videos where babies are tasting lemons and they're making that sour face and they're so cute? But do you ever notice they almost always reach for the lemon again? They're
I love it.
so into
So shocking.
flavor.
It's
Yeah.
true.
They really do, despite the little shudder and the cute
Right.
pursed lips, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know, that poor baby lemon. And then they're reaching for it again. And that's just so true of that age. We call that the flavor window. You might actually see that through that first year of life as well, where babies are more interested in trying a variety of foods. But early on, we really recommend that you offer as much variety as possible, including roasted or very well steamed vegetables. Because although those tend to have a little bit more of a bitter undertone, they're an important part of being an adventurous eater. And if kids are more willing to try them, and the more you try something, the more you learn to love it, then we want to offer those while the window's open.
I love that. And I also interviewed Dr. Normali Fernando, who is your co-writer on this book and part of the Dr. Yum Project, which I'll probably link to your talk as well, because it's such a great resource, the
That's
Dr. Yum
amazing. Yeah.
Project. And we talked also about vegetables. And I think I said with my talk with her that I thought those green purees, none of my kids ate them for the most part. And if you taste them, ew. But roasting vegetables, okay. You
Right.
didn't say it, but it makes them yummier and sweeter.
It does.
My grandchildren, I cannot roast enough cauliflower or broccoli for them. All of them adore it. They're coming like, oh my God, I've got to have 5 heads of cauliflower.
That's fantastic. It's so true. And one of the reasons I love to roast vegetables is because you can do all of them on a big sheet pan and then they store well for a good week in the refrigerator. You can puree them up if you want to. You can chop them up and add them to scrambled eggs to get that allergen in. There's so many different things you can do, and they're right there so handy. And you don't even have to serve them warm. A lot of kids love a roasted red pepper strip straight out of the fridge.
You can hold them.
They can hold them. Exactly.
The cute little toddler holding their little broccoli stalk.
It's so cute.
But it also makes them softer, right? Because one problem with vegetables, it can be too hard. And it can be a choking hazard. And we're going to put the warning out there for choking. It's very important, if possible, to take a CPR course. American Red Cross offers them, so you know what to do about choking. But I really want you to talk about choking versus gagging, because that's another landmine.
Definitely. And a lot of misinformation out there. Here's what I want everybody to know. As often as feeding specialists like myself say things like, well, gagging's actually good because it's a protective mechanism that helps to protect your child from choking, that's not entirely true, because a little bit of gagging, occasional gagging, and people always ask me for a number, but 3 times a meal when you're first starting to explore new food, you'll notice, just like babies tasting lemons, that little kid will have a little gag. They'll learn to manage the food. It might spill out of their mouth. That's okay. And then they just keep going on their own, especially if we don't overreact. But if you do have a child who is gagging frequently during a meal, and you can tell, gosh, it kind of makes them shut down. They seem a little scared now. They seem uncomfortable. They just want to get out of the chair. That happens too often. Then we are worried about developing an aversion to food. So gagging is really good on the every once in a while basis, right? And the reason why it's good is the gag reflex is designed to make sure food doesn't fall back in the airway, but it is not foolproof. Choking is when the food does fall into the airway. It doesn't have to go all the way into a lung or down your, I'm trying to think of the right terms to use for your audience, bear with me, all the way down what you think of as the air pipe, think of it that way.
Trachea, yeah.
but there is also a little triangle of tissue at the top of that airway. A lot of times round foods like hot dog coins or grapes or even a blueberry will lodge right at the top of that funnel. And that is very difficult to dislodge. So choking is truly where we are blocking off the airway in one of those areas that I just mentioned. Because of that, you have to have air to produce voice. So if that baby isn't making any sound, they're choking. If you start to see drool coming out the sides of their mouth, or a little bit of a bluish tint, but they're trying to cry and very little, if no sound is coming out, they are choking. It might look like a gag, but it's the sound that makes the difference because the airway is blocked. What does that mean for you as parents? If choking has no sound, you will not hear your child choking. Please always keep an eye on them. If you can sit with them when they're eating, that's amazing. But I also understand when you got a couple kids and you're running around, you're trying to get everybody fed, just be aware, choking typically has no sound. You will not hear it. You will see it.
Right. And that's why using the Red Cross, program and knowing how to handle it is really, really important, but also avoiding choking hazards. that's my other concern with baby-led weaning is if you don't understand what's a choking hazard that you're giving to that child. And you have to worry about choking for years, okay? It's not like the first 12 months or 24 months. It's at least 40 years.
It's at least 4 years. It's at least 4 years. And I probably post more on this topic on my Instagram than any other topic because, and yet the number of people who still comment who don't know about this. I would say, tell me what you think, but I would say the one that most parents don't know about when it comes to toddlers, you know, even a 3-year-old, is popcorn. And those babies are getting fed popcorn in a dark theater. That's the one that scares me the most. Although I could certainly list a lot more, but that's always a surprising one for parents. He can't have popcorn? Not until at least age 4. It's so chokeable.
It's really hard. I mean, and even you said blueberries. That actually surprised me because I thought they were pretty small. But blueberries vary in size, actually.
Vary in size, and they're round, and a lot of
Grapes.
times
Oh my
they're
God,
very
grapes.
firm.
And hot dogs. Oh my God, hot dogs, grapes. All of these things that form this, like, you know, it becomes a ball valve. I mean, it's a really big problem.
It's a plug. It's a plug.
Yes, and also not giving kids food to eat while they're running around. Again, it's really hard. I know.
And without taking up too much of your time, and also it's a little bit hard to do an audio broadcast and a podcast, but so all my books describe, okay, what do you do instead? For example, hot dogs, you're going to cut it into 4 to 6 long strips, and the kids can hold the strips, or you can mince it. And I mean really mince it.
Tiny pieces.
And because you don't want to make a bunch of blueberry-sized pieces, because now we're really in trouble. You can do that as well. And finally, for anyone listening who's thinking, I don't know, like, does my kid really need to have a hot dog? Probably not. I certainly realize there are quote unquote healthier versions of hot dogs out there
Right.
for, you know, certain brands. But I think also we can't let go of the sight that there are certain foods, especially in the United States, that are very much Americana. And the kids are going to get exposed to these, maybe when you're not around. So at least establishing what the routine will be, that if you get a hot dog, you bring it to mommy and she'll cut it up for you. You know, I want the kids to learn these things. Mommy, I've got grapes. Can you cut them for me? And then maybe when they're around 3, when they're sitting and paying attention to you, then we practice eating a hot dog together that's whole. Then we practice biting off a whole grape, but only face-to-face supervision and practice, so that if they do get one on their own before the age of 4, hopefully we've done a little bit of parenting proactively to safeguard some of these hazards.
Absolutely. And also everybody else that feeds the child needs to know this, like grandparents.
That's right. That's right. And these are wonderful grandparents. You and I are grandparents.
Yeah,
These
they are. They're
wonderful
the best
grandparents.
grandkids.
Yeah, but you know, things change. We learn as the more we know. And I hope that anyone listening will feel free to sign up for my newsletter or go to my website. I have so many free handouts there, and share those with grandparents as well, because they want to keep that baby safe too.
Right. And it also makes it more like less emotional. Like, here, this is what my feeding expert says, not what I'm saying. Not like you
Exactly.
did something wrong for me. And I want to talk a little bit about parental anxiety, because before we started, we talked a little bit about COVID and how we're seeing more feeding problems. And we're not talking about feeding disorders, but we're trying to be more proactive and saying, what is the role of anxiety? And when I say anxiety, I mean anxiety in the child and anxiety in the parent and feeding.
I love this question. Pediatric anxiety and anxiety in general is a really big special interest of mine. And I've been studying it prior to COVID, but definitely during the pandemic, boy, did it come to light. And not only, this is the way I want everyone to think of it. I want you to imagine everybody carrying around a bucket, and that bucket is labeled anxiety. And in that bucket is a certain amount of anxiety water that's just splashing around. We all have different levels of anxiety in our buckets. Some people are less anxious than others, and it's okay if you tend to be a little bit more of an anxious person. Now, when that bucket is so full that it becomes so burdensome to carry, it is heavy. It is quite the load. It's always you're always aware of it, then we start to become concerned that perhaps this is actually an anxiety disorder, where typically a little bit of anxiety water is there to keep us safe. You know, it's there to help us remember to cut up the grapes before they turn 4. A little bit about anxiety around choking is a good thing, but being so scared that your child would choke that you aren't willing to try some foods that they need to learn to chew or mash, and you stick with purees for over a year, that's where the parent anxiety is really beginning to impact the child's feeding development. And then likewise, I always want everybody to remember that children, especially our own children, are little sponges. And I think, especially in my professional opinion, with their mom, if the mom's the primary caregiver, that they can pick up on our own anxiety and our anxious feelings. So learning to identify the difference between adaptive anxiety, which is what keeps us safe, and anxiety that gets in the way and it results in functional impairment, that's what we want to pay attention to, because that's going to have a direct impact on the way our child views the world as well. And then if I can take that one step further, Lisa, it would just be that kids who have trouble eating for a variety of reasons that we probably won't go into today tend to develop anxiety around food because eating is hard, it's challenging. And when, as a parent, when you see your child struggling to eat, that creates so much anxiety in you as well, because we want to nourish our children. We want to see them eat. We want to see them thrive. And in my opinion, I think it's one of the number one things parents worry about is their kids' growth and whether they're eating a variety of foods and truly becoming an adventurous eater, but also getting the right nutrition. And so you can see where the child's anxiety and the parent's anxiety are intimately connected.
I love everything you said, and it is intimately connected. You really were talking more about the parent than the child's intrinsic anxiety, although you kind of alluded to the fact that when the child has it, the parent feels it worse because it always hurts us more than it hurts them.
Right.
It's so true. We're going to have a second episode on actual feeding problems. We didn't even mention neurodivergent kids because we are seeing also, since COVID, before COVID, a rise in neurodivergence in children, and those kids tend to have more problems eating, and that's intrinsic to them. And by the way, we're not blaming parents here. You
No.
are not causing any problems at all, right? We're talking about being aware, right, of your anxiety. It is not your fault, right? Wherever it comes from, whether it comes from you dealing with your kids' anxiety, whether it comes from your own anxiety, it's just a piece we need to address, but it's not blaming. I want to really make that clear.
Absolutely. And also, I know from getting to know you, Lisa, that when a parent comes to you with concerns about their child's eating, you are very keen and interested in what they have to say. I also want to give all the wonderful pediatricians out there a break, because I know, my brother's a pediatrician, my best friend's a pediatrician. I go to the AAP every year and talk to pediatricians, and I know how busy and stressful their days are. And sometimes they may not appear to take parents seriously when a parent expresses that they're worried about their child's nutritional health. The biggest tip I can give parents is schedule a separate call. And even if you might not even want to bring this up in front of the child, you could even hand them a note, write it before you get there, and hand them a note as you go and say, here's one more thing. I'll call you about this one and I'll schedule it at the front desk before I go. But I wanted to let you know, I want to talk about this one more thing when it's just the two of us. Now they are tuned in during that phone call for that one concern. And that's when I want you to stress that you're stressed. Because tying back to what we were just talking about, your own anxiety comes into play here. It is not your fault. It is valid. Those feelings are very valid. Follow your instincts. If you have any concerns about your child, not being an eater where they find joy in food, where they're interested in food, where they are willing to try a variety, or you're just not quite sure of how to go about it, talk to your pediatrician about getting some support from a pediatric feeding specialist.
I love that so much. Louder for the people in the back, number one. Number two, I read this in one of your books and I loved it, and I told you this. Not every pediatrician is as passionate about feeding. So one thing you could also ask for, is there a particular pediatrician, clinician in the practice that specializes or is especially interested in that, and request a meeting with them?
True.
Okay. Number one. Number two, not every kid can get into feeding therapy because it's not so accessible outside of, unless you're going to pay privately, or you qualify through early intervention services, which is very hard to do on feeding alone, just to be completely transparent. So those are things that I really wanted to point out there, but I really appreciate your giving a shout out to the pediatricians. This is where I give all pediatricians everywhere a big hug. It's really, really hard to be a pediatrician now, and we are definitely not blaming you either.
No.
But talk about the way things used to be. It used to be that you would say normal, 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 and the kid's growing fine. And I think one stumbling block is you go to your pediatrician and they say, well, your child's growing on the curve and all kids are different, so it's not a problem.
But the problem is that it's stressing you out as a parent. And that, I think pediatricians care so much about the kids, but they also are in this field because they care so much about the parents. And I really, truly believe, I don't think I've ever met a pediatrician who brushed off the fact that a parent said, this is really stressful for me. And even if it's just to hand them a book and say, why don't you take a look at this? Let's schedule another call. I just want to I want the parents to hear how much that pediatrician cares about them as well.
Really, really true, but the pediatrician may not understand, and I really want to talk a little bit about developmental variations in feeding, because I don't remember if it was in this book or one of your other books, you talk about feeding is a complex developmental task. And pediatricians are not necessarily trained in that the same way as, say, a feeding or speech therapist is. Many are, by the way. Many are very, very savvy. I'm not out there to mock the pediatricians, but there can be a knowledge gap as well. And the parent may not be anxious about it. They may say to their pediatrician, is everything okay? And the pediatrician says yes, and then they're fine because they weren't worried because the pediatrician reassured them. Not every parent is worried about this.
That's a good point, that sometimes just hearing that, all kids are picky, he's going to be fine, he'll grow out of it, is reassuring to the parent. And it may be that particular pediatrician doesn't have the background in feeding development, as you mentioned. Frankly, many SLPs and OTs do not either. It's really a specialty. But when I first met Dr. Namali Fernando, who you just interviewed, and we decided to write this book together, when we talked about what's our main goal of this book, she said, I want to get this in the hands of every pediatrician. And I said, I want every pediatrician to know that feeding is a developmental process, just like learning to crawl, walk, run, just like learning to sit up on your own. It's a developmental skill. It doesn't come to every child naturally. And in fact, 1 out of 4 typically developing children will require pediatric feeding therapy. So we don't want to take a wait and see approach when we know that 1 out of the 4 kids that walked into their office that day might truly need some support. And so that's why I appreciate this podcast so much, because it is about the more we know, right? And just talking to you, I've learned so many things. So I love the fact that everyone will focus on how to support the process with patience and the right strategies, and that we give children the foundation they need to become confident, lifelong eaters.
I love that. And we're going to have to do part 2. And that's such a great place to end. I'm going to end here. So thank you so, so much for doing this with me. And I can't wait until part 2.
Now I'm excited. I want to do it right now. So we should get on the schedule.
Yes, we will. But goodbye to everybody right now. We'll be back later.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you for listening to Kids Matter. Raising healthy, happy children takes a village, and I'm grateful you're part of ours. If today's conversation resonated with you, please share this episode with another parent, grandparent, teacher, or anyone who cares about kids. Together, we can build the supportive community our children deserve. I'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts, questions, or suggestions for future topics at kidsmatterpodcast@gmail.com with no exclamation point. Your voice truly matters. Until next time, keep advocating for the children in your life because kids really do matter. They are our future. I'm Dr. Elisa Minkin, and this has been Kids Matter. Please note that while I am the pediatrician, I am not your child's pediatrician. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. For any medical concerns or decisions, please reach out to your child's healthcare professional.